How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today we're talking about regret. The type that you've moved to Denver, you've settled in, the honeymoon excitement phase is over, and now you're starting to realize that there are some things about this move that are starting to bother you. We're here to talk about the 5 biggest regrets that people have shared with me about making this move, and we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett, and listen, there are 2 things that we aim to do here. First, we talk all things moving to Denver, the Colorado Front Range, living, eating, breathing, experiencing the city. And 2, as a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team of some of the state's most talented realtors, we're helping people like you move here each and every day. So the number and email you see on your screen, just know that I am always the person answering those phone calls, answering those texts, answering those emails, there when and if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is, what are the 5 biggest regrets people have after moving to Denver, Colorado? So the reason for this video was actually pretty interesting. I'm sitting at lunch this past Saturday, talking to a friend / client, someone that I met from YouTube in the beginning, and they're getting ready to make this move to Denver. And as we're sitting there talking about homes and neighborhoods and different things that are exciting to them as they're experiencing Denver, that was one of the questions that was brought up to me. What are the regrets that people have? Now, this question was initially about a house that they were thinking about purchasing. What is the regret people have on that? But it really evolved into this conversation of when someone moves, when they get there, and again, once that initial excitement where everything is just wonderful, what causes that regret? So I went to work, compiled a bit of a list. I reached out to some of my past YouTube and some of my past out-of-state clients to ask what had their experience been like. So in compiling that list, they're not in any necessary order. It's not like one is necessarily more important than the other, but they were kind of unique in the fact that just about everybody mentioned a couple of them in their story. So having said that, we start with the first, and that is that you don't feel like you're living in Colorado based on where you decide to live. So this, fully admit right off the bat, this tends to be more of the case for people who choose to live on the east side of town, east of I-25. As you get farther into the east side of Denver, you get into the plains of Colorado. And listen, Denver is not a mountain town. There are mountains right there. There are mountains 20, 25, 30 minutes from Denver, but you're not in the mountains. So people will move to Colorado. They'll move to Denver. They will choose the east side of town, and especially if they are on, if they have the downtown skyline in between them and the mountains. In a lot of those instances, the feedback is that, we live in this, good neighborhood. We like walking around in it, but we don't really see the mountains. It's pretty flat. There's nothing about our neighborhood. It's kind of cookie cutter. Maybe it's an HOA type community where everything's kind of uniform. And so that feedback, that feeling is that, we moved to Colorado, but for the most part, when we're in and around our home, we feel like we're just in any other suburb that we could have gotten anywhere in America. And again, this is really a location specific situation, because I don't feel like I get that feedback, or I shouldn't say I don't get that feedback very often, from people who are either on the western side of town, again, west of I-25, or maybe south or a bit north of Denver. West and southern suburbs tend to give, at least again, according to feedback, the best Colorado feel to it. But I think it's imperative that not necessarily that you have, this pristine view from your house. That could be important to a lot of people, but just if the mountains are playing a role in you moving to Denver, if the Colorado, skyline, that Colorado feel is important to you, that is one of the biggest regrets when people choose a place to live that doesn't give them at least some level of that. So it's not a regret that we don't live in the mountains or we're not on the foothills, but we want to live in a community that makes us feel like we're in Colorado. Now, the second one kind of plays into that, but not necessarily the same, and that was, what happened to my Colorado life? So again, I get a lot of people who they move to Colorado and they have an idea of what they want that life to look like. Man, they're gonna go to the mountains all the time, they're gonna go hiking, they're gonna be skiing, mountain biking, they're gonna camp a lot. Denver, man, they're gonna get to sporting events, and they're gonna go to Red Rocks for concerts, and they're gonna go to Rockies games to drink beer and eat hot dogs because you don't really watch baseball there. You know, you're gonna go to a football game. Like, you're gonna do all of these things. And especially when it comes to the outdoor, when it comes to the mountain factors. And then they get here and they don't really do a lot or any of it. It doesn't happen. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's the work requirement, maybe it's where they live again. We'll get into some of the income factors. And maybe it's just because it's a can that gets kicked farther and farther down the road. Like, eventually I'll get into hiking, eventually we'll do some camping. There's also the factor, and this happens with anybody, it's like signing up for a gym membership because you think that's going to create this desire to go to the gym, and it doesn't happen. So I'll have people who move here and they've never been outdoorsy, they've never enjoyed hiking, biking, any of those things. They've never skied before. They kind of convince themselves, I'm going to enjoy this once I get there. And then they either don't do it or they don't do it enough to kind of build that enjoyment. And so that is part of the regret. Man, we made this move, we came to this state, and we just haven't lived the Colorado life. Now, I've seen the flip side of this. I have some really good friends, Daniel and Jenny, if they happen to watch this video randomly. I mean, these are this couple, man, they moved to Colorado, they moved to Denver, they become great friends, and they live the best Colorado life I've ever seen. Like, they got involved in outdoor groups, they learned some, like, you know, wildlife and nature safety and camping. Like, these are things that they didn't necessarily know, and they just got themselves involved. So this, again, can go both ways, where some people come in and they lean into the Colorado experience and they freaking love it. The biggest regret, one of the biggest regrets I hear, are the people that thought they were going to do that, they desired to do that, and for one reason or another, it just didn't happen. And again, life gets busy. You know, sometimes your driving requirements, again, this is dependent on where you're living, if you have to go too far to explore it. So just something to really consider as you're getting ready to make this move. Next up on the list, and this I think goes for anyone who is, you know, moving where maybe you're moving away from family, you're moving away from a good friend group, anything like that. And that is, you know, the Denver freeze, or some people call it the Colorado cold shoulder. And listen, this is going to apply, I think, to anybody who makes a move to a new place. But it's the regret of leaving a friend group, and then the process or the work it takes to build friend groups here. Now, Denver has some Midwest-ish, you know, life to it, but it's not, to me, it's not as warm. You know, depending on your community, it's not as warm. You know, I don't hear a lot of stories of, hey, you know, the neighbor, we randomly met the neighbors and they invited us over for a barbecue. You know, there's somebody in this community that really got us involved. It takes some effort to build friend groups here. Denver has become a very transient heavy city over the years. That's why natives get all butthurt of how many people have moved here. And so time and time again, I've heard you know, how difficult it has been for people, or how much effort they have to put forth in order to, again, build friend groups. Now listen, maybe you luck out. Maybe you move into a neighborhood or you move into an apartment, whatever, and there are, you know, just some people that are around that are very welcoming, and, you know, and inviting, and that changes. You know, there are those stories where, you know, you meet this person and that person knows a bunch of people they introduce you to. That occurs. But that is the exception to the experiences that have been shared with me rather than the rule. That for the most part, people have to make a concerted effort to get involved, you know, to meet people, and to really be present in that. And I think there's a bit of a culture of independence here that you don't tend to see. You know, you'll see these big friend groups, and once they're created, it can be, just in my experience, it can kind of be hard to get into that friend group. Like, some of them are okay with it, but then there's a larger group that's like, ooh, I don't know this person. We don't need to have them in our group. No, you can't sit with us. So I would emphasize, to not have that regret, just be prepared that you're gonna have to make some effort to meet people. You're gonna have to get involved in groups. You're gonna have to be perhaps more outgoing than you already are. If you're, I consider myself an extroverted introvert. You know, it's difficult in crowds of people I don't know. That's a barrier you're gonna have to work on if that's challenging to you. Next up, and listen, this is a dynamic that could go either way, and you want to really find your Goldilocks. And that is the house poor trap or the too tight of a budget trap. So I have folks who move here, and we talked early on about the Colorado, like feeling you live in Colorado, that you want mountains, that you want trails, things of that nature. And a lot of those things come at a cost. So the reason that people might choose to live, on the east side of Denver, in certain areas of town where they can get more bang for their buck, is affordability. And so you'll have people who they say, you know what, no, we want this lifestyle, we want this house, and they put themselves in a position where affording it is challenging, where everything is tight. And that then spreads. You may have already experienced this in your life, where that house cost is so high that now it spreads to not being able to enjoy other things. You're not able to go to the mountains as often as you want. You're not able to go skiing because it's expensive. You're not able to go to sporting events because it's pricey, where so much money is tied into your house. I've also, again, seen the opposite, where people are on so tight of a budget that they move to a community or a neighborhood that they don't really enjoy. And that's huge if you're buying. Listen, if you're renting and you don't like where you rent for 6 to 12 months, as long as you feel safe, you're gonna get over that. That's not catastrophic. But especially if you're buying a house, you really wanna have a good feel. So it's crucial, not just so that you're in a good neighborhood and again, that you feel safe where you are, but also that you're able to enjoy the amenities of your community, the amenities of Denver, the amenities of Colorado. So again, finding that middle ground, because those are equal. I have plenty of people who have come back to me and they've said, man, I wish we didn't go this aggressive, buying or renting. Wish we didn't go this aggressive, wish we had made some adjustments there. And then I've had some people go, you know what? It would have been worth the extra money to have our place in, this part of town where I had that view that I wanted. View's a big one for people, I'm telling you, as opposed to where we are now, where again, goes back to that I don't feel like I live in Colorado line. That is one of the most repeated sayings or phrases I hear people say. Next, and listen, I think all the other ones are very important, but this is probably the biggest because it causes, I shouldn't even say probably, this is the biggest because it causes the biggest challenge. And that is not having your work situation figured out, or at least pretty darn clear, before you move to Denver. So, I have people who move here because they're remote. I have people who move here because they know where their office is going to be, Denver, or what have you, so they can plan for it, right? They can choose, but they know I'm going to be in this area, so I want my drive from my home to be, this distance. For people who don't know what that looks like, and especially if it's risky, so they don't know what kind of income they're gonna have, they don't know the location they're gonna be in, it just leaves a lot of uncertainty for them. And what ends up happening to a lot of folks, hopefully it's not an income issue. Hopefully the job pays what you think it will, but I've had a lot of situations where, and usually these people do rent, to be clear, but I'll have people who choose a rental and then their work is a lot farther from them than they anticipated. All of a sudden, they pick a job and they've got to drive 25 minutes on Google with zero traffic, but then they go to make that drive and it's 50 minutes each way. And now all of a sudden they're in the car an hour and a half each day. Again, maybe the pay wasn't what they expected. So now budget is stressful, drive time is stressful. And as I've said before, this starts to spread into other things. If you don't have at least, a decent amount of income coming in, if your finances are tight, you're not really enjoying as many amenities as you might. I mean, hiking is free, don't get me wrong. There are things to do here that don't cost money, but having money does help you enjoy more things, all things being equal. And the time factor. When I hear people that say, hey, I'm cool with a 30-minute drive, yeah, I am as well. Each day you think about an hour to and from work, okay, that's pretty normal. Now when that starts getting up to an hour and a half, 2 hours, because there's some weird traffic and things are funky, that's when it starts to really wear people down. So just keep in mind, like Denver's market, we've got a great economy here, but the job market is competitive. Depending on what field you are in, I strongly encourage you to have as much clarity on that. And if you're not going to have clarity on, if you are moving to Denver and then you're going to figure it out once you get here, maybe you're with a partner who already has income, maybe you have some money saved, whatever that looks like, just try to give yourself as much flexibility as possible. Can you accept less to be closer, or are you going to make a lot more to be farther? Really, to have some of those elements in place. And Denver is one of the best cities, I think, in the country for remote work. So certainly, if you're in that position, aces, because you can go anywhere you want. And the last one that I'm going to mention, because it comes up a lot, and I do think it's a very important factor, whether you have kids or not, whether you're thinking about having kids or not, and that is not really paying attention to school zones or school districts and recognizing how much that matters. Again, if you have kids, I would imagine that's going to play a role in some of your decision making, especially if you're buying a home, if you're planning on having kids. Even if you're not, even if kids are the farthest thing from your mind, or maybe you're an empty nester, whatever the fact, it's considering, again, even if you're renting, that school zones are going to play a role in the community itself. That is a big driver of a community, that people who want to be in neighborhoods tend to want to have good schools. And some of your higher quality neighborhoods, let's just be real, are going to come with higher quality education. So knowing that that's going to play a factor for you, obviously if you don't have kids and you don't plan on having kids, or you don't plan on having any more kids and the schools aren't necessary, you don't need to spend a ton of time. It's not like you're interviewing them, but just having an idea, especially if you are buying a house, having an idea of what the schools are like in your area, how desired those schools are, that's going to play a factor for you at some point in your future. Again, even if it just has strictly nothing but your home value to do with it, that's still pretty darn important. So listen, I know a lot of those were related. That if you're moving to Denver, if you're moving to Colorado, you want to feel like you're living in Colorado. You want to feel like, man, there's the mountains, look at this magical place, I've got hiking, I've got these things. Crucial. Feeling like the things that are important to you. If you don't know if you're going to enjoy these things, that's okay. A lot of people, heck, when I moved back to Colorado, I didn't really like hiking. That's something that grew on me, and I grew up here. So, that happens. But especially if these things are important to you, if you love camping and you love skiing or these things, put a plan together to make sure that you're able to enjoy at least some of that. You may not be able to dive in, right away, but at least get some of that element. And obviously, where you live, the cost of it, where the job is, and as I mentioned, just hopefully making those friend groups. One of my favorite things about this channel, and I say this genuinely, it's been really kind of a magical thing in my life, is the amount of friendships that have come from people who have moved to Colorado from this. So there's a friend to start out. In the meantime, if I can be of any service, my number and email there on the screen. Know that I'm always the person answering the phone calls, answering those texts, answering those emails there when and if you need me. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. That was the 5 biggest regrets, plus a little bonus, that people have when they move to Denver. Until I see you next time, peace.